David Crispin with the United States Marine Corps.
Jacqueline Beam, 519th Military Intelligence, U.S. Army.
Matthew Hernandez, United States Navy.
Keith Claxton, United States Navy.
Paul Portillo, United States Navy.
Robert Griego, U.S. Navy, Operations Specialist.
Chris Oakley, United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, State of New Mexico Army National Guard.
Melinda Medlin, United States Army.
Norman Aragod, U.S. Army National Guard.
Raven Nieto, United States Army.
Oscar Martin Lopez, United States Marine Corps.
Martin, United States Army, retired.
Valentino Baca, United States Marine Corps.
Jeff Folgate, United States Air Force.
Kenneth Quintana, United States Army, and as well as New Mexico National Guard. Combined service, 24 years.
Santa Fe County is hiring. Every Tuesday, Public Works holds a rapid hire event at 102 Grant Avenue at 8:30 a.m. Also, the Correctional Facility holds a rapid hire event every Tuesday at 9 a.m. That is at 28 Camino Justicia. We have great jobs, great pay, and great benefits. Come work with us. Why do you work for Santa Fe County?
David Crispin with the United States Marine Corps.
Jacqueline Beam, 519th Military Intelligence.
David Crispin with the United States Marine Corps.
Jacqueline Beam, 519th Military Intelligence, U.S. Army.
Matthew Hernandez, United States Navy.
Keith Claxton, United States Navy.
Paul Portillo, United States Navy.
Robert Griego, U.S. Navy, Operations Specialist.
Chris Oakley, United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, State of New Mexico Army National Guard.
Melinda Medlin, United States Army.
Norman Aragod, U.S. Army National Guard.
Raven Nieto, United States Army.
Oscar Martin Lopez, United States Marine Corps.
Martin, United States Army, retired.
Valentino Baca, United States Marine Corps.
Jeff Folgate, United States Air Force.
Kenneth Quintana, United States Army, and as well as New Mexico National Guard. Combined service, 24 years.
Santa Fe County is hiring. Every Tuesday, Public Works holds a rapid hire event at 102 Grant Avenue at 8:30 a.m. Also, the Correctional Facility holds a rapid hire event every Tuesday at 9 a.m. That is at 28 Camino Justicia. We have great jobs, great pay, and great benefits. Come work with us. Why do you work for Santa Fe County?
For my family.
For your safety.
For you.
For my community.
For the public.
For the community.
For the retirement.
To serve my community.
For my family.
For the outdoors.
David Crispin with the United States Marine Corps.
Jacqueline Beam, 519th Military Intelligence, U.S. Army.
Matthew Hernandez, United States Navy.
Keith Claxton, United States Navy.
Paul Portillo, United States Navy.
Robert Griego, U.S. Navy, Operations Specialist.
Chris Oakley, United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, State of New Mexico Army National Guard.
Melinda Medlin, United States Army.
Norman Aragod, U.S. Army National Guard.
Raven Nieto, United States Army.
Oscar Mark Lopez, United States Marine Corps.
Martin, United States Army, retired.
Valentino Baca, United States Marine Corps.
Jeff Folgate, United States Air Force.
Kenneth Quintana, United States Army, and as well as New Mexico National Guard. Combined service 24 years.
Santa Fe County is hiring. Every Tuesday, Public Works holds a rapid hire event at 102 Grant Avenue at 8:30 a.m. Also, the Correctional Facility holds a rapid hire event every Tuesday at 9 a.m. That is at 28 Camino Justicia. We have great jobs, great pay, and great benefits. Come work with us. Why do you work for Santa Fe County?
For my family.
For your safety. For you.
For my community.
For the public.
For the community.
For the retirement.
To serve my community.
For my family.
For the outdoors.
David Crispin with the United States Marine Corps.
Jacqueline Beam, 519th Military Intelligence, U.S. Army.
Matthew Hernandez, United States Navy.
Keith Claxton, United States Navy.
Paul Portillo, United States Navy.
Robert Griego, U.S. Navy, Operations Specialist.
Chris Oakley, United States Navy, United States Marine Corps, State of New Mexico Army National Guard.
Melinda Medlin, United States Army.
Norman Aragod, U.S. Army National Guard.
Raven Nieto, United States Army.
Oscar Mark Lopez, United States Marine Corps.
Martin, United States Army, retired.
Valentino Baca, United States Marine Corps.
Jeff Folgate, United States Air Force.
Kenneth Quintana, United States Army, and as well as New Mexico National Guard. Combined service 24 years.
Santa Fe County is hiring. Every Tuesday, Public Works holds a rapid hire event at 102 Grant Avenue at 8:30 a.m. Also, the correctional facility holds a rapid hire event every Tuesday at 9 a.m. That is at 20.
Welcome everyone to special capital budget session. It is 3:35, and I'm calling this meeting to order. May I please have a roll call?
Of course, Madam Chair. Commissioner Camila Bustamante.
Present.
Commissioner Justin Green.
Here.
Commissioner Hank Hughes.
Present.
Commissioner Anna Hamilton.
Here.
And Chair Anna Hansen.
Present. Next is 1C, approval of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda, Manager Schaefer?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. We'll begin with a brief presentation that recaps last week's special. Yes.
We're at approval of the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
No changes from staff.
Madam Chair, move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Hamilton, a second from Commissioner Hughes. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Now we will go on to number 2A, and you're on, Manager Schaefer.
Thank you. And again, forgive me, Madam Chair. So we'll begin with a PowerPoint presentation that recaps information that was both presented to the Board of County Commissioners at last week's special study session, as well as summarized to the Board over the weekend. The goals of our meeting today is to summarize management recommendations vis-a-vis significant capital resources, respond to the initial feedback that we took away from commissioners from last week's special study session, and then hopefully receive some final direction on capital projects, including maintenance projects that can be rolled into the final budget for adoption by the Board of County Commissioners at tomorrow's regular BCC meeting. So when you look at all of management's recommendations and you compare that to the significant sources of capital funding that were identified at our last meeting, what you're left with is approximately $13.543 million in what I referred to as generally unrestricted resources, by which I mean, while they may be restricted to capital and to maintenance, they're not earmarked for specific departments or uses. So again, that summarizes, or sums, to approximately $13.543 million. As I previously noted to the board, if the board were to approve the San Pedro expansion purchase that is on tomorrow's agenda, that $530,000 purchase would be funded with capital outlay gross receipts tax. And so I did want to make sure that we captured that here as well. You're looking at additional potential sources of future projects in the Law Enforcement Operations Fund, the Fire Operations Fund, and the Corrections Operations Fund of, again, not insignificant amounts of money. And then finally, the opioid settlement funds. Those funding sources are restricted based upon the funds that they reside in, as well as the limitations on the use of opioid settlement funds contained in the various settlement documents. So to recap, we're not recommending that all available resources be budgeted at this time. This is a slightly augmented slide of our first presentation. Reserving some budgetary amounts will preserve the ability to fund new projects that arise from the ICIP process or future capital improvement planning process. It also provides a source for contingencies that may exceed project-specific contingencies. And to put that $13.543 million in perspective, that represents about 6.38% of all of the existing and new capital and maintenance projects. So when you view it from the projects we have on the books, it puts that number in perspective, again, vis-a-vis what is being asked to be set aside, again, to meet any contingencies that might exceed project-specific contingencies. Not budgeting all available resources also provides resources in the event of revenue downturn, and it also anticipates known future needs and contingencies. You've heard me mention the public safety radio project several times. That's a significant project that, the estimates for which on the low end range from 10 up to $17 million. As we look at the balances that are in the Sheriff's Office and in the Fire Operations Fund, those monies, to the extent they're not used for the public safety radio project, will allow us to anticipate and plan for future growth in terms of facilities, apparatus, and/or equipment in both departments, in particular in the fire department, because of the extremely expensive nature of the apparatus that is necessary for future fire department growth. There are certain projects that we hope we'll receive grant funding for. Not spending or budgeting all of available resources helps us react in the event that grant funding does not materialize. And then we'll have unanticipated maintenance projects, roofs, what have you, that will come up from time to time. And then finally, focusing on the jail and the opioid funds, we anticipate not insignificant expenses in terms of either remodeling or building a detoxification and medical wing at the adult detention facility, as well as providing a potential source for initial funding for what might be not insubstantial operational needs to staff any such detoxification or medical wing. In addition, having fund balance has benefits in the interim when it comes to rating the county's bonds that will be selling in the fall, our general obligation bonds that were approved in 2022. And finally, there's just the reality of capacity constraints in terms of moving the existing projects forward. The few initial feedback that we received from commissioners last week that I wanted to address. There were new additional proposed projects that were mentioned. Those projects will be scoped, rated, and ranked as part of the ICIP process. And I would note for all commissioners, if you have projects that have not yet made their way or were not included in the CIP process, please visit with Leandro so that we can begin to scope those projects and have them rated and ranked as part of the ICIP process that is underway. So again, all commissioners, if there are projects that are not included on the CIP, please, or ICIP as new projects, please do visit with Leandro so that they can be addressed. As a process augmentation, we do intend to comprehensively review capital projects at mid-year so you can see where we're at from a budgetary perspective, and that will again provide another opportunity to look at new projects that arose as we went through this year's budget cycle. There was a suggestion that we anticipate that project budgets and project cost may increase over the next fiscal year due to inflation. County staff does agree with the concept of planning for that possibility, but rather than increase the budget for all projects or for a subset of projects by an anticipated amount of inflation, our recommendation is to instead, as indicated, reserve funds on an aggregate basis and add funding to projects as needed instead. That reflects that our current estimates do represent the best estimate of project cost. It also allows funds to be allocated as needed without addressing the perspective that we are quote unquote taking money from another project in order to meet a funding shortfall in a different project. And then finally, by moving forward with an aggregate set aside, if you will, it avoids the potential of incidental project scope creep that could exist due to an increased project-specific budget. So in other words, if folks see the money associated with a project, that may engender an ask for a would like to have as opposed to a must-have in the project, and just see the project scope itself increase due to the perceived availability of funding. One thing that I did not put on the slide, it was a specific comment, I believe, from Commissioner Hamilton relative to water rights purchase and whether we should continue to budget funds for that. I did have occasion to speak with Brian Snyder, our Public Works Department Director, and he confirmed for me that while we're not necessarily active in the water rights purchase market every year, we are always looking for opportunities to increase our water rights portfolio, and we do occasionally receive requests in that regard. So I didn't put that in the slide, but I did want to mention it.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little clarity. I wasn't concerned that we were doing it. I was questioning why it was on the yellow list when it's not really time, like it's not constrained, like we can't start this till next year. I just assumed that something like that would be on the green list or something. So yes, I totally get why we do it. I think we should do it, but it's, that was my question. Sorry for the misunderstanding.
That's okay. Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner Hamilton, and I apologize if I misunderstood the nature of your feedback. So we did include in today's presentation and had distributed in substance much of the of those exhibits to the commissioners over the weekend. I'm going to briefly reiterate what those exhibits are. The first is an exhibit that shows currently funded projects. The first column shows the amount of the budget that would roll forward to fiscal year 2024. The next column wouldn't be included in what you approve tomorrow as part of the final budget. Encumbrances that roll forward to the next fiscal year are presented after the final budget is adopted. For those of you who've been through at least one budget cycle, you'll recall that you'll receive a budget adjustment request in the late summer that carries forward all of the unexpended encumbrances that are going to roll forward. The third column are additional funding that is anticipated from legislative appropriations and bond proceeds. And then the next column is the amount of gap or additional county funding that county staff is recommending for specific projects. And when you sum all of those up, that would be the anticipated fiscal year 2024 budget for the various projects once the encumbrance bar is adopted by the board in the fall. The last column identifies the source of additional gap and additional county funding. So I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding this exhibit, but it is a cleaned up version of what was presented to the board last week, in which we added the source of additional county funding to the last column of the spreadsheet. I included in today's packet material, again, I'm sorry.
Manager Schaefer, Commissioner Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Manager Schaefer, question about, we've had discussions about what the clerk's warehouse facility, and I don't see it on here, and I'm wondering if that's an oversight or if there's money allocated for it. There's a project sort of lined up for it in whatever phase it is. Is there a line in there for it?
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Green. That would be on the list of green projects, and that's the Airport Road facility. So the total anticipated budget for the currently planned phases of the clerk space at the Airport Road facility is $2.75 million. As additional phases are scoped, that would be the basis for a future additional funds in future fiscal years.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying that.
Commissioner Bustamante.
Madam Chair, Manager Schaefer, I'm sorry, I don't know what LATCF, and maybe I should have asked that last week, but I just don't know what it stands for.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Bustamante. It's an acronym for, bear with me, I have to find another book. A one-time distribution of funding from the federal government, the local assistance and tribal consistency funds, so LATCF for short. And Yvonne can correct me if I'm wrong, but those are general purpose funds that were included in one of the federal ARPA federal stimulus packages. We're proposing to use them for capital projects as allowed by that federal act.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay, I have one more. So just remind me about Agua Fria wastewater. It looks like we have 3.5 million. We're going to put another million in it. And we're anticipating the 2.3 million. Where is that coming from? And then 700 million to get 700,000 to get us to 7.5 million. So that will, once again, that'll cover the 8 streets and plan for the next 10 streets.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, yes, that is what that funding represents, and I'm looking to Brian Snyder for confirmation, but that was the idea behind the request for the additional 700,000, as it would allow the 8 streets to be completed and the next 10 to be designed.
Madam Chair, that is correct.
So I see that the 2.3, it does not have any highlight on it. So does that mean we're anticipating that, or that's what we're going to ask for? If we don't get that, then where is it going to come from?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair and Commissioners. If it's not highlighted green or blue, it just means that it's a combination of anticipated bond proceeds as well as legislative appropriations. So I believe there was 1.1 million from the legislature, and then 1.2 million was included in the bond proposed bond questions, and so that's why it wasn't colored. Forgive us if we didn't highlight that, but that's why it was, again, white, is that it's a combination of those two sources.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the other material in the packet, I just included Exhibit B. This is a listing of existing maintenance projects as well as proposed new maintenance set-asides. I wanted to include that for completeness of today's packet. Be happy to answer any questions that anyone has regarding these projects and additional set-asides. And then finally, Exhibit C recaps all of the proposed new funding other than, again, that which would be coming from the legislature or from bonds that we have not yet sold, which we anticipate doing later this summer. So this would be reconciliation between funding additional gap or additional county funding for existing projects that have funding associated with them, new projects in total, as well as projects that came about from previous board direction, considering such things as EV charging, as well as a potential set aside to contribute to drainage improvements in West Alameda. So again, this is a reconciliation that shows where all of the quote unquote new money, other than, again, legislative appropriations and bond funds, where that would be coming from, and the resulting balances. The summary information was included in the PowerPoint, but this identifies it specifically by project and by funding source, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Any questions? So I have a couple of questions that I back on the maintenance page. What I have noticed when I'm walking around this building of 102 is that it's in the windows, the old windows of this building that are in wood, the paint is deteriorating, and it really needs to be needs to have some attention. And so does the portal, which I think that's all of our district. So, you know, I can, you know, we've spent a lot of money making this building look good, and then when you walk by and you see a window or the portal with chip paint and paint peeling off, one wonders what happened.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. The short answer is the sun is pretty brutal on any painted surface, but the longer budgetary response is that when we talk about maintenance in this context, these are maintenance projects that would actually be capitalized, meaning it would add to the recorded asset value on the books of the county. That's a technical explanation of what we're capturing here. There's certain maintenance that would come out of the Public Works Division operating budget for small things, which I think is where the painting that you're referencing would be addressed. And Brian, if I got that wrong, please correct me. And Yvonne, if I butchered the accounting part of it, you can correct me as well.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, I'm not quite, I have one more question. Then I'm sorry I didn't catch this, but you know, I believe that the sidewalks on Lopez Lane, I don't know, maybe I missed it. I thought I saw that on here somewhere, but I'm not okay. Lopez Lane sidewalks, yes. So I see it's in the yellow. We only have $600,000 allocated for that we got from the legislature, I believe. But you know, because of the situation there with the sewer that is contaminating the groundwater there, I'm wondering if we need to possibly add something to that, or if we need to figure out a way to get more money allocated to the sewer, the sidewalks, so we can include that in the improvement of the sidewalks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And
so there's a sewer, and Brian mentioned it last time. There's a septic tank on Lopez Lane, just a little bit north of where the sewer goes to, and the leach field has deteriorated, and all of the sewage is going into the ground and into the neighbor's yard, and they basically have to empty it every day.
Madam Chair and Commissioners, went back to the exhibit related to currently funded projects and have hopefully identified the Lopez Lane sidewalks. The $1.7 million is the proposed addition to that project, which would come from capital outlay gross receipts tax for a total proposed fiscal year 24 project budget of $2.3 million.
Okay, and that'll help with providing sewers in that area that we need to move the sewer up.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, and Director Snyder can correct me if I'm getting it wrong. The Lopez Lane is one of the 8 streets that are proposed for sewers. This funding would be coordinated so as to address any sidewalk-related improvements. So, through both sources of funding, I believe the need for sewer on Lopez Lane as well as sidewalks would be addressed through the 2 sources of funding. And Brian, if I got any of that wrong, go ahead and correct me.
Madam Chair, that is correct. That is the plan.
So I think that's a great plan, but the problem is that Lopez Lane was never considered part of the original sewer plan. And so therefore we're adding another additional sewer, and the people in Agua Fria, you know, one street is less. I mean, I know it's a technicality, but I want you to continue to think about the original plan that was for all the wastewater, and that this is a new development that happened. And I'm glad that it's included in the 8, because having sewage running onto people's ground and contaminating the groundwater right near the river is not something we want to see. So thank you. I just want to make that clear. Okay, Commissioner Bustamante.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sort of stuck on that importance of making sure the sewer isn't ending up someplace it shouldn't be, and shouldn't be so low on the priorities. So I missed where that really captured my attention, is what I'm trying to say. I did have a question about the planning that is happening, and this is more of a procedural, like in time thing. It's not on here, but there is planning underway in Cerrillos, and I'm wondering what the process for next year, and I recognize that it's premature for this exact budget, but where it would land up in that planning process. The people in Cerrillos are looking at what they would like to do, and then when that plan has come up, essentially that is when we would make sure that it is in that following year budget. Is that how this will work this time around?
Madam Chair and Commissioner, it depends upon when that planning exercise is completed. I believe that the hope was to have some consensus in the community within the next month, if I'm not mistaken. So if that in fact does happen, it is possible that it could be scoped and included in the ICIP process before, which is adopted this calendar year. So that is where it could potentially be captured as a project and looked at either as part of the legislative process or as part of our own mid-year budget process. If for some reason that couldn't happen, then it would be the next spring is when it would be scoped and evaluated as a potential project. So it depends upon when we achieve that community consensus as to what they might like to see with the current fire station that is no longer going to be needed once the new fire station comes online.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Manager Schaefer, in that process, part of that is to get to what they'd like to see that structure to be. And I'm wondering if it isn't something that would be budgeted this year. One option that they've asked for, just even in the interim, is if it were to be completely raised, would that be something that could happen before we would actually make sure the funds are available for for a new structure? In other words, is there a halfway point for the use of that land? If it, all right, they want something that looks like this, and ultimately there'll be a facility or something, but until then, this is what the lot would look like, so that I'll give an example that they've used or shared with me, is so that the burro race could actually start in that empty lot before something that's sort of a midpoint, the building's leveled. There's a place to do something with it until whatever their plan is gets the funding to support it. Does that make sense?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Bustamante, I think that it does, and I'll try and paraphrase back to make sure I captured the idea. I think what you're asking is, if the ultimate community consensus that arose suggested that raising the existing or again demolishing the existing building was necessary to accommodate those goals, could that demolition and some sort of reclamation work be considered phase one, if you will, of an overall project? If that was the question, then the answer is yes, it could.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Hughes?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have a question, but just a couple comments. One is that I'm really glad that staff put the work in to do this. I think it's really important that when people pay their taxes and we get ahead on our income, that we spend the money on projects that people need, from, bulk water stations to roads to sewers to everything. Everything on this list is great. I think it's going to be a big challenge to get it all done in the next year to year and a half, but I'm glad that we're starting down that process to get these projects done. And I just wanted to add that I did talk to the ECIA, the El Dorado Community Improvement Association, and they did vote to put the road money that's in the El Dorado roads line item toward the paving of Encantado Road, so that should help a little bit. That's about $1.1 million that, when you combine those. Of course, the road may end up costing more than we budgeted for it, as Commissioner Hamilton has pointed out, but at least it's all going into one road. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all for now.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Commissioner Green?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Manager Schaefer, question, or this is probably for Brian. There's two Chupadero projects. One is for the mutual domestic and one is for the roads. And I'm wondering if there's a synergy there at all for trying to put water pipes and things under the roads, and if there's let's make sure that one happens in a good sequence, and if there's a coordination efficiency allowed there.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, yes, if there's any efficiencies, we would definitely put we would do the Dig Once policy, where we would put the water line in and do that work prior to any road work. That last thing we want to do is dig up the road after we've paved it. So definitely we would coordinate that.
That's great, thank you. And while we're at it, maybe broadband up there, because I know that area is suffering from that. Even if we don't get fiber up there for some years, making sure that we have some conduit. If we're especially doing a water system, it's a pretty easy thing to lay right along there. Thank you. Great.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Thanks, and I'm sorry if you've already addressed this. I'm sorry if I missed it, but I think it's worth just double checking. One of the things I was thinking about was, the justifications for not budgeting everything that you've presented. I'm supportive. It totally makes sense to me. And and there are two ways to do things. If we do that, my concern is covered. But especially looking at the projects on the yellow list and some of the ones even on the green list that might not be quite as far along, that are by schedule going over more than a one-year period. But so mostly it's the subsequent projects that, we talked last week about the 22 or whatever it was % increase in inflation and building costs over 2022, and the projected 4% in 2023, which sounds ridiculously low to me. I was just wondering if projects that go over multiple years or aren't intended to happen until next year, even if these costs have been like updated before you did this list, they were updated now in 2023 with current 2023 numbers. Have any of them been inflated to 2025 or 2026 numbers if those are the years they're actually going to occur? Because it would be a shame. I mean, if, like I said, if we don't budget all of that unencumbered money, we're covered for this sort of thing. But if we do start thinking about budgeting, putting it to other things, it would be a shame to have projects that we're committed to and we're trying to fully fund that 6 months from now all of a sudden aren't fully funded. And I know it's only an estimate, so we might think about doing that if we haven't already. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioner Hamilton. Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the project budgets, and as you recognize, Commissioner, they are our best estimates at this point in time. But I believe an effort was made last budget cycle to update those numbers, so we should have captured, is my understanding, the monumental increases that we experienced through earlier this calendar year. But in addition, looking forward, to the extent that as those projects become further developed, then we would be looking forward to the revenue that we're anticipating in future fiscal years. So obviously this isn't a zero-sum game, but the pot keeps having money come in each year. And I think that would be an opportunity as well as you get closer to those projects actually going out to construction, that any funding gaps that materialize could be addressed with that revenue in fiscal years beyond fiscal year 24. I hope that addresses your concern.
It does. That's another way to do it, and that certainly makes sense as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions at the moment? Okay, thank you.
So, Madam Chair and Commissioners, we're looking for direction that we can use to finalize the material that will be before you tomorrow for the final budget. If these projects and these recommendations are acceptable to the board, again, that will be the base for some final tweaking that Yvonne and I do this evening to prepare the final budget material for tomorrow. So that can be by way of vote, or it could just be a way of thumbs up. Other finger gestures are not welcome, but just a thumbs up that this looks as if we're good to move forward in preparing the final budget.
So once more, any questions from the board before we I'm in discussion or comments or suggestions or I thought a motion would be fine, but I have a question. So, Manager Schaefer, you're concerned about the San Pedro open space and what we're going to do about that. Yeah. Well. Yeah, I just thought we could have a discussion about that. Am I San Pedro open space? Everybody know what I'm talking about?
The San Pedro expansion, Madam Chair?
Yeah, okay, San Pedro expansion, open space. Okay. So,
Madam Chair, I confirm with Yvonne. If the board, when you get to that item of business tomorrow, were to approve it, we can make that last minute change in the course of the meeting. That's not an issue. So again, the resources are available. If the board chooses to allocate them to that purpose, we can make that change tomorrow. So you wouldn't have to include that in any motion made today. Again, we could address that tomorrow after you make a final decision on that particular request to purchase that expansion property.
Okay, that's kind of what I wanted to ask Commissioner Green.
And this may be sort of fungibility of funding. So in a broadband subject, if some of that can be used for either planning, if money comes in, and for actual capital building for bringing some sort of, access control, security cameras, and public Wi-Fi to our facilities or around town. And so the current Wi-Fi expansion budget may be usable for that. If you feel comfortable with that, then that covers it. But if not, then I'm wondering if there's a special line that needs to be in there to allow for that or to budget for it.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, I think fully scope out broadband and affiliated equipment for the purposes described would be something that we would be planning toward the mid-year budget process. As we'll go over in detail tomorrow when we finalize the operating budget, we do budget contingency funds as a budget contingency each year. And so if there is an urgent need that arises, we can address that in more or less real time. So for example, last year there was a need for the clerk's office to have Wi-Fi, I believe, at the Stanley Cyclone Center, if I'm not mistaken, and we use contingency funds for that. So there are ways that we can address immediate needs, but in terms of what I will call that bigger project, which is a bunch of sub-projects, I think that that's what we would be scoping and including during the upcoming ICIP process. Did I get that right, Leandro?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Green, yes, I would agree with Greg. I also think there's different pools of funding that may be available to help us achieve the goal. So, for example, the fire districts may have funding in different buckets that they could use to achieve that goal. So, and that may be more of a maintenance type project that I'm not sure if it would need to be capitalized or if it would be something that we could add to the project list as we go through the year.
If I may, almost in a sort of like dig one sort of policy, when we're going and doing ADA upgrades to a senior center, we should probably do some wiring to, we're on site to do, we're doing some lighting, we're probably doing a few different things, but make sure that we bring in Wi-Fi or some broadband to those facilities, whether they're for election purposes or seniors or public service. And if I think that was, basically not to say that Chupadero, the Chupadero Road project needs to be dug once with conduit. Almost every road in all of our districts should probably have that checked out to make sure that there's at least some money to bring broadband down those roads and conduit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Green. Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Hamilton. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So please correct me if I get some of this wrong, but I would like to move to accept the full range of recommended capital funding, which I understand includes the funding on all, updating the funding on all of the green, yellow, and other lists, and leaving the cushion of 13 point whatever it was million as a cushion for further funding as we go along and additional projects and overrun coverage and whatever as specified.
And current and proposed maintenance projects.
And current and proposed maintenance projects.
And if I could just add, and that includes the proposed new projects as well.
Yes, the proposed, yes, the ones that are.
And I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. I want to just say that when I was at the Pride Parade, I ran into the chair of the audit committee for the city. And she said to me, which I think is a real compliment, is she said, the county gets things done. And so I want to say that to staff, that, you know, we couldn't do all these things without you, and how important it is that we have the dialogue between the commissioners and between the county staff to really support the projects that we see throughout the county that are really important to the constituents and to the taxpayers, and that we are able to provide, you know, the kind of services that we provide. So I just want to say thank you to everyone, you know, for their hard work on all of this. And with that,
Under discussion?
under discussion.
I'm in favor of the motion, but I just wanted to point out that if we do approve the purchase of the open space, but we also combine the roads projects at El Dorado into one, we would still be $500,000 ahead instead of behind. So there'll be, and I assume there'll be other adjustments besides that going forward, you know, as we find out different things about the projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hughes. Thank you, everybody. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Next is concluding business. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second?
I have a motion from Commissioner Bustamante, a second from Commissioner Hughes. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Yay. Okay, we're adjourned.